There is something about staying in a haunted hotel room that sounds like such a fun idea for a date night or a business trip. But these are real places with real stories of hauntings, and in some cases real people who have disappeared. In this video, we're going to tell the story of one particular hotel room where 5 guests died, and at least 7 people reported seeing ghosts. After all, when you're building a new hotel in the heart of Los Angeles, it can be tough to find a spot that doesn't come with a few skeletons in the closet. And when he arrived, he knew that the place was a mess. There were rats everywhere, and so was the management. The hotel had been getting a lot of bad press lately. As John approached the man, he realized that he had no face. John tried to speak to the man, but the faceless figure simply kept staring at him and gesturing toward room 307. Unable to communicate with the ghost, John headed back to his own room, locked the door, and called the front desk. He wanted to know what had happened to the ghost he'd seen and why the room was bricked up. And that's where he met Mrs. Luella Barker, the widow of a man named William. William had stayed in room 37 before vanishing without a trace. The hotel had been the site of at least 2 murders and numerous suspicious deaths. There were 3 women who died under equally mysterious circumstances, and then there was the case of Richard. Richard had been staying in the hotel for several weeks when he suddenly went missing. His room was in complete disarray, but there was no sign of forced entry. No one knows what happened to him. There had also been several guests who'd gone insane while staying at the Cecil Hotel, including one man who'd talked to invisible people. Guests have reported hearing screams in the middle of the night, seeing the ghost of a man in a top hat, and experiencing feelings of dread and sadness while staying in the room. Whether or not these stories are true, one thing is certain. Room 308 has a dark past and may never be truly safe again. And another hoodie climbed out of his window convinced that he could fly. But none of these stories were as disturbing as the ones about room 308. His wife believed that the Cecil Hotel had something to do with his disappearance and begged John to look into it. In order to find out what happened to her husband, John spoke with the hotel staff, who confirmed that William had indeed stayed there, but they claimed to have no idea what happened to him. They had no record of his disappearance and no memory of him at all. This was odd, to say the least, since it was hard to forget someone who drank heavily, argued with everyone, and played the piano loudly in his room all night long. But somehow the staff had managed to forget him completely, but it would take him years to find out the answers to those questions. During his initial investigation, John discovered that at least 3 guests had died in room 308 alone. There was a man named Helen, who had been found dead in her room. She'd been sitting upright in bed, fully clothed, as if she'd been waiting for something. Then there was the case of Pauline, who debooked the room under a false name and refused to speak to anyone while she was there. She was found dead in the same position as Helen, sitting in bed. The last person to die in room 308 was a woman named Elizabeth, who had seemingly taken her own life. Her body was found hanging in the closet by a hotel maid. They told him that nobody was registered in room 307. Since room 307 had been vacant for months, John decided to follow the ghosts back to room 307 to investigate. But when he knocked on the door, he was met with silence. The ghost was gone. When he looked, however, he saw that there was no record of William Barker staying at the Cecil Hotel. The couple had traveled from Canada to and had saved up for months in order to afford a stay at the glamorous hotel, and yet there was no record of them ever stepping foot inside. Clearly, the hotel was hiding something. Rooms were filthy, guests were dying, and there were rumors that the place was being used for illegal activities. He took the key to room 307 and discovered that it was a dead end. Since the wall behind the door had been bricked up years ago, many of the rooms had structural problems or needed major renovations, so they were essentially sealed away from the rest of the hotel. But there were also rumors that the hotel purposefully sealed off certain rooms because they had become too dangerous. See, guests often complained about blood coming through the pipes, and they couldn't fix the problem. It was almost like someone was inside the walls of the hotel actively trying to bleed everyone staying there to death. And if that didn't sound terrifying enough, sometimes guests would start acting erratically. People would go missing, having psychotic breaks and hallucinating the presence of ghosts and demons. The hotel staff would then seal off the room and remove the guest, presumably to a psychiatric hospital, but no one ever really knew. And once the guests were gone, the room was never used again. It was impossible for anyone to be hiding in there. This was especially disturbing because John had seen the ghost of the man standing right outside of the room. He knew that it wasn't just a figment of his imagination. So why was the room sealed off? But none of this scared John off. In fact, it made him even more interested in writing the story. And so he checked into room 308, so to say. From the beginning, guests had strange experiences. One guest awoke from her nap only to see a ghost standing over her bed. Another heard screams in the middle of the night. And then there was the infamous author, who wrote what is now considered the definitive story of the Cecil Hotel's haunting. That would be John Keel. This is the story of room 308 at the Cecil Hotel. The Cecil Hotel was built in 1927, and it opened its doors with a dedication to old world charm, specifically European in nature. He heard some commotion down the hall, but nothing out of the ordinary. The next day he went out and explored Los Angeles, and later returned to his room for another night, as sleep. Once again, there was nothing particularly scary about the first few nights he spent there, but everything changed after the fourth. He began hearing regular footsteps outside his room at night, which he assumed were just other guests returning from a night out. But when he complained about the noise to the front desk, they informed him that no one else was staying in the hotel at night. He was the only guest. Suddenly, the hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and he started listening intently. The footsteps outside his door stopped. Then he heard a knock. Someone was outside his door. While most of Europe is known for its gorgeous architecture, grand operas, and terrible accents, there was one other thing that came along with those things: ghosts. And while the owners of the Cecil were very much aware of the fact that their new hotel happened to be situated directly above an active and rather famous cemetery, they decided not to worry too much about it. In 1951, John Keel was a journalist for Collier's magazine, and he was sent to stay at the Cecil Hotel in order to write a piece about it. The first night he spent there was relatively boring. He went out to the hallway and saw a man standing in front of room 307. Determined to get to the bottom of this mystery, he left the room and went to the basement where he found the hotel's key rack. As it turned out, the hotel had a history of sealing off rooms for one reason or another. When John heard this, he became even more determined to find out what was happening to the guests at the Cecil Hotel. These deaths were disturbing, but it was clear that they were natural. So John moved his investigation to the next floor up. Determined to find out the truth about William's disappearance, John asked to see the guest book to find out which room he'd stayed in. And as John's investigation continued, he uncovered even more secrets. John eventually learned that at least 4 people had died in the room under mysterious circumstances. The Cecil Hotel has since been renamed the Stay on Main, but it's still rumored to be haunted. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out our content, where we have plenty more videos about haunted hotels. And remember to subscribe.